Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Thank you all. Nice chanting. Everyone led very nicely. So we have a Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, Prabhu.
What's our schedule, Ramana?
Till 4:30 approximately.
4:30, okay, good. Actually, I can leave it here, I need to like an office.
Yeah.
I'm not to escape, I was coming around again to have you sing, but you went that way.
I was making sure your wife had something to eat. There was a
Oh,
higher
okay.
purpose to all that.
Chanting, dancing, and feasting, so it's good, all three of them. So I was thinking maybe we can read from can you ask them? From the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In your Bhakti Rikshas, you read Gita regularly, or which format of Bhakti Riksha do you do?
They study the Bhagavad Gita in the public class, but every day they have Bhagavatam.
Every day. Who does that?
Well, you will tomorrow.
Oh,
So
who does it the other day?
we have like it's more like a reading and discussion.
Uh-huh,
So everyone we read like 5-6 verses a day.
uh-huh,
So there's about 15 devotees,
that's great.
and if someone has any extra comments, any thoughts, realizations, so everyone reads basically
You do that every morning,
every evening, mornings,
every evening.
because most
What
people are
time in
working.
the evening?
We do from 7:45 to 8:45.
7 days a week?
So 5 days we have this in the week, in the evening, weekdays evening, and weekends we do in the 9 a.m. morning. So Saturday morning we have the Bhagavad Gita like we had today, and Sunday morning we have some guest speakers or like
So during the week it's in the
in the
evenings.
evening and the weekends
The
morning.
weekends, it's wonderful. Okay,
And daily we have morning japa from 5 to 7 online.
just with temple devotees.
Yeah, plus few other also join
Nice. Should you like turn on Zoom or
Zoom.
phone? Zoom, so people walk around their house and jam with that there.
Most people keep in the mornings camera off, which is
Yeah, it makes
fine.
more sense.
Yes. At least it gives accountability.
Yeah, it's nice.
Helps to be together.
Yeah.
So
We should
yes.
maybe, you play Prabhupada tape there too in the background.
Not as of now.
Think about that. We could hear each other in Prabhupada.
Just so you know, you're live on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube.
Good. 3 million, 4 million viewers. Temp is a very important city, so I'm not surprised. That's very good. Okay. So Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 9. Maybe I'll just read it. We'll do the next one. Machita madhyata prana bodhayanta panaspanam katayanta nityam tushanti chadamanti cha. Lord Krishna says, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Maybe we can, let's repeat that together. The thoughts of my pure devotees
The thoughts of my pure devotees
dwell in me.
dwell in me.
Their lives are fully devoted to my service,
Their lives are fully devoted to my service.
and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another
Always enlightening one another
and conversing about me.
and conversing about me.
So the pure devotees' thoughts are dwelling in Krishna, lives are devoted to Krishna's service, and they derive satisfaction and bliss from enlightening one another and conversing about him. So purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Pure devotees whose characteristics are mentioned here engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself. And in the mature stage, they are actually situated in love of God. Once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection, which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe. And out of them, there are a few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting, Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
That seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahma Jyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as the plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits, and the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. In such a state, the devotee actually attains the transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. The Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to devotees, as stated in the Bhagavatam itself, 12, 13, 18. Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. In this narration, there is nothing about material activities, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the only narration in which the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his devotees is fully described. Thus, the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vinata Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravanti Charane Nirvisesha Shivani Pashti. Om Agyanatanyana Shakyanan Anjana Shalakaya. Chakshur Om Minitamina Tasa Shri Gurmenama. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Tati Swapanantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare. So I thought of this verse when we came here because I saw how everyone was chanting so nicely and associating with each other so nicely. And it was reminding me how that Krishna is so kind that he appears, as Prabhu is describing here, in the sound vibration of his name and in descriptions of him. That he actually, his full potency is there. So when we associate with devotees and others are interested in hearing about Krishna, then through that sound vibration, we become purified. And that's what the purpose of life is stated to be, that we become purified and we reawaken our original relationship with Krishna. So it's really inspiring to see all of you coming together on the weekend. I'm thinking we're not, Tampa's we're 2 hours from Gainesville, approximately, right?
Yes.
So you probably know the story when Prabhupada went to Gainesville, right? And he was describing in his lecture, he talked about how this far away corner of the world, of the universe, remote corner of this universe, even here, Lord Chaitanya has come. It was feeling like that. So we're kind of in a semi-remote corner of the universe, being just a little ways from there. But still, Prabhupada came and Gornitai came and the devotees came. And of course, there is an example for prasadam distribution. So, Krishna comes with all of the processes of bhakti come. And through this association, then people have a chance to become purified. So just like here, that the devotees come together on a regular basis and chant and read and study and take prasadam together. This is actually the best thing we can do with our time. And I was thinking we're eating after we, came here a little later than most of you were taking prasadam. I'm just thinking, this is so wonderful that families should get together, moms and dads and kids, a weekday afternoon to do what? To glorify Krishna. And it really is the essence. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks about how a grihastha life especially is particularly perfected when people keep their home like a temple and they come together in the morning and the evening and they worship Krishna and hear about Krishna's pastimes. Because doing this, it purifies our mind, purifies our consciousness, purifies our relationships. And in this way, actually, our lives become a little bit transformed. And sometimes a lot of ways transformed. And we see in the society at large today, people that don't have a spiritual practice, as is described in the Nectar Devotion, everybody wants to serve something. Everyone wants to serve something, someone. So people pick up different causes. Prabhupada says, if you don't, where we live, there's a lot of dogs. Most places in America. Now in India too, there's a lot of dogs. And people, they're so attentive to taking care of their pets. They have dogs and different kinds of, that's okay. It's all right, people keep pets. But the idea is that we have this loving propensity, and if we don't connect it with Krishna, we want to put it somewhere. And people are putting their desire to love so many things in so many different places, but then they don't become satisfied by that experience. But when we come together as devotees, it gives us the opportunity to actually hear about Krishna and understand how attractive Krishna is, and realize that the things of this material world, without its connection with Krishna, ultimately they have no ability to satisfy us. They don't have any ability to really engage us. And as we know, they're all temporary. We were someplace recently. Where was I? In St. Louis. Yeah, I was in Missouri. And I was driving not too far, the other side of the state.
Photo of us.
Yeah. And I was driving the vehicle out in the country, and times changed. There was all these old barns that had been abandoned. And you see one that's kind of a little intact, and then you see one that's kind of falling apart, and then you see one where the roof's caved in, and then you see like, oh, isn't that a barn? Like, where the plants are completely taken over. And a couple of years ago, we actually went to, it's that place in Thailand. Siem Reap is the city, it's a famous place. Well, they have these trees. There was a big Vishnu temple in the whole city of temples. Rukmini in the next room. Where is it? In Cambodia? What's that place? Angkor Wat. Anybody been there? Angkor Wat. If you get a chance to go to that part of the world, there's Buddhist temples and Vaishnava temples, and they're centuries and centuries old, and they were like abandoned in the forest, and they were discovered, local people, the world discovered them not too long ago.
Actually, they built a whole city there.
Yeah.
And the king ruled there, and then different other invasions and
Well, there were many kings. Like one king came in and built a temple complex over here, and another king, like there was a Buddhist king, would build a temple. And then there was a Vaishnava king, and he would build like old parts. So like I grew like that over the centuries. So, but what's really interesting is this amazing civilization is huge. And now they have these huge trees that have actually grown practically into the buildings. So the buildings are there, but the jungle's taking over again. And of course, it's wonderful to see how the Vaishnava culture had spread so far. That's one message. And then to see how there are advanced civilizations even many, many years ago, that's another message. But then also you get the sense of whatever we have here, nature's going to take it over, right? Like we all know today, this is a very beautiful home. And I live in an apartment composed of similar elements. We all know that the wind blows too strong and the rain comes too quickly, the house melts, isn't it? Like you go to India or Europe and you see some of the older homes, especially like in Europe, the walls are like this thick, stone. You can abandon the place for 100 years and come back, put new water system and new electrical, and it's like a solid house, right? But today's homes, I wonder how long are they going to last? So why? Because material nature, it falls apart, it decays. So people in the modern time, we put a lot of our faith and our hope in new things without necessarily understanding what's the value of them. I read something recently. They was talking about Best Buy, one of those kind of stores that sells all the technology things. Something like 40 or 50% of what people buy there, they throw away within 6 months.
Wow.
This huge percentage, because it's just, you buy it and right, like I'm really outdated. I have an iPhone 10 and somebody the other day was saying, yeah, I can't wait to get the new one. I was thinking, what's that, like 11, 12? It was like 13, like 13. I just got mine like a year and I'm still paying for mine. And it's like 3 models later, right? And the whole thing is, oh, you can't, well, that one doesn't have this new fancy feature. Sometimes you read too, you probably know a lot more about this, that with whatever the people's smartphone or some other technology, like your computer, maybe use 2% of its capacity or 10%. Nobody can use everything it can do, but still you got to get the newer one, which has all kinds of other new things that it can do. So this way, people are kind of like chasing after some of the things. But here, Krishna's explaining that in the midst of this civilization that's kind of like an overdrive, like a car that's you kicks into overdrive. You can't maintain that pace very long. So the whole society is going so quickly, but you ask most people, where are you going? They're really not sure. They just know they're going in a hurry and they don't have time to stop and talk to you. Because, you can try it at work someday. Just, ask somebody when you're calling, Joe or Bill or Mary, what's your ultimate goal in life? And they're like, huh? My goal, I got to get the project into the boss by Monday, right? Or I'm saving up to buy a new car. When the new models come out, I'm going to buy a new car. Or my wife and I, long-term goal, we want to go to like Paris before we die or something like that. But, the Krishna and the Gita and all the Vaishnava charts, they're encouraging us, but wait a minute. Is there a goal that transcends, that's more important, that's more significant, that's more rewarding than what most people are doing? Because we see the results of what most people are doing, not everybody, but most people, they are really caught up in this fast pace of life. And they're feeling so much the pressure, and there's so much, you can see, especially American, things become so polarized into, different groups of people, political parties, and different cultural divisions and like that. And they're very, like that expression, wound up very tight. And because of that tightness, they're so quick to become disturbed. So Krishna here is explaining a whole different consciousness, a whole different concept, that we can actually focus our thoughts on him, dedicate our lives to his service and not other things. And then we do so that we can actually experience satisfaction and bliss. So that's what we are aspiring for. That's what we're beginning to taste as we go on in our spiritual practice. And then I wanted to particularly emphasize the concept that in order to achieve this, we need to be very careful about the association that we have. It's describing here about how devotees always is enlightening and conversing about one another in association. So that's very important. Does anybody know this year right now what the historical significance is of this year? you know, any particular significance of this year?
Srila Prabhupada's 125th.
Yes, Srila Prabhupada's 125th birth anniversary, or appearance anniversary. So technically, it was the Vyasa Puja we just celebrated, but because of COVID and all that, we didn't really have the opportunity to arrange global events or things leading up because the world was kind of in turmoil. So the GBC decided, well, let's celebrate from this Vyasa Puja through next year, this whole year, 125th. So it's a special opportunity for us to really think about, just to describe here, to hear, right, to enlighten and converse with each other. So it's a very special opportunity this year to converse about Srila Prabhupada and to enlighten one another about Srila Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada really, like, I'm looking at all these beautiful paintings here. So like, okay, so there's the painting of Lord Chaitanya. So it's like most of us, now some of you are, there's some Bengali families here, so maybe they have some past history, you know. But most of us, I mean, you're special. You're Eka Chakra. I can't talk about you. That's another level. I'm not aware. But most of us, this painting of Lord Chaitanya, we wouldn't have known anything about Lord Chaitanya except for Srila Prabhupada, right? And even I think, now I could be mistaken, but most of the devotees I know of Indian backgrounds that came to America, they weren't necessarily thinking, I want to go to America and focus my life on my sadhana. Right? Prabhu, when you came, was that your meditation? I want to go to America because there's better sadhana there? No. Mataji, were you thinking, let me come to America so I can become enlightened in spiritual knowledge?
Yes, I did.
You were in 1967.
Yes.
How were you going to be spiritually enlightened in America?
Because my family, my house in India, we are spiritually brought upbringing.
Yeah, but why did you come to America?
Because I wanted to study.
Study Bhagavad Gita.
And Krishna is always there with me.
Oh, so you had that faith. So you're one of those rare souls. Most of us will say, I didn't necessarily come here. I think most of the devotees from India are saying, I came here for so many other things. Some devotees from India will even say, I came here, I picked up some of the American ways. I was Pucker family, but I came here and under influence, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to do this, you got to do that. And after a few years, whatever spirituality they had was in big trouble. We know one family lived in Washington, D.C. near us, now initiated, very nice devotees in this man. They were just kind of getting sucked into the material world. And one day there was a knock on the door. And there was a Hare Krishna devotee standing there. And they were kind of surprised. They didn't know there was a temple. And he talked to them and gave them some books and started visiting them regularly. And then they connected with the ISKCON temple and became very serious. In fact, during a few periods, that temple had its ups and downs. They really were the ones that kept the temple open for a few years. It's a real financial crisis and they kept it going. But by that association, they're inspired seriously in their spiritual life. Whereas before, the material association of being in America was having the opposite effect on them. So whether we come, like in my upbringing, I was completely ignorant of Krishna until I went to high school and I took a religion class. And we learned a little bit about Hinduism, not so much, but a little bit. I don't even know if we learned about Krishna. I don't think Krishna was talked about too much in my religion class. But anyway, even that little bit of association, and then gradually, in fact, what happened in my high school class is the Hare Krishnas came to my high school. And I don't remember much except all the girls had big rings in their noses. That was really unusual. It was some Detroit temple. Maybe you came you came a little later. Okay. Because I grew up in Detroit and she joined the temple in Ann Arbor. So we might have crossed paths at some point in time. So they came and I remember them some of the kids were not so interested, but I thought it was really interesting, everything they did. And they were so exotic. In those days, all the men had hair down to here. Well, in high school, maybe only to here. But, these guys walk in with their shaved heads, the girls with the big rings and chanting Hare Krishna. They were really kind of transcendental. And I remember one or two of them said they had dropped out of college to become a Hare Krishna. And I was a senior in high school. Like my whole life was based on, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to learn everything there is to learn. And my life, all these exciting things are going to open up. And then these people walk in the door, say, we quit that to do this. I was like, what? No, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then later when I went to college and realized it didn't make me completely happy, I would run into the Hare Krishnas there again every now and then. And I remember I was at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for some time. And they used to chant on the diag.
Yes, every day in the diag.
Every day. And I can remember kind of walking out of my apartment and coming around to these big buildings and hoping I would hear the clean, clean, clean of the kirtan. And when they were there, I just felt so much better. I would just go and sit with devotees for a few minutes and then go to class and feel more peaceful. And then I can remember some days coming around the building and they weren't there. And it was really, oh goodness. The kind of light went down. So just by that little bit of association, then gradually, that taste increases. So this is Prabhupada's mission. You know, you think about it, it's remarkable. He came to this country at 70 when he came here. Most people at 70, they're retired, you know, with their grandchildren or whatever. There's no question of, in fact, I'll tell you something, maybe you can show this sometime to your whole group.
Sure.
There's a film that was made about the 50th anniversary conference of ISKCON at Harvard University. It was held in 2016. And it was about an 18-minute film. If you go into ISKCONnews.org, you can just Google Hare Krishna 50th anniversary Harvard. And the film it's on YouTube, so you can find it. Maybe you just find it, go to YouTube, I'm not sure.
It's kind of 50, isn't that what it's called? This kind of 50.
Maybe ISKCON 50 Harvard. There's a couple little like ISKCON Desiree did a little news clip about it. So if you click on it, you see something that's like 3 minutes long, that's not it. You want to find the 18-minute version. But in this film, it has a recording of Professor Thomas Hopkins, who was a professor of religious studies at Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania, I believe. He was he the very first, I think, scholar to meet Prabhupada? The very first or one of the first. And Rukmini told the story the other day. He went to, you find it there? He went to the temple. He heard there was a Swami in east side of New York. So he went there and he walked in and he'd done his PhD work on Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he was very well aware of the Bhagavatam. And at that time, I forget, I read the history, there was like 2 sets in the whole United States. There was one in some library in Chicago, I think, and one in New Jersey, something like that. And he walks into this little storefront of a temple, and there's a couple of young people there that knew practically nothing. And sitting on the shelf was 1 or 2 or 3 of Prabhupada's Bhagavatams. And he saw them and he picked them up and he asked them, you know, what is it? He realized it was the Bhagavatam. And they couldn't even tell him what it was. They had no clue. They didn't know. So here is this saintly person whose 125th anniversary we're celebrating this year, who came across the ocean all by himself. And we've heard the story, 2 heart attacks on the boat, had no place to go, went to Pennsylvania, lived with some people for about a month. And he said, okay, I think I got a sense of what's going on here. So he went to New York City all by himself. So many trials and tribulations. And if you haven't read the Lilamrita recently, I really strongly suggest you spend some time, especially this year, and read about Prabhupada's. There's so many biographies now. There's wonderful, beautiful biographies. Shuktakirti's got a biography. Buddha Maharaj's biography. Tamal Krishna has wrote a biography, Prabhupada. Shambhasunda has a wonderful biography, Prabhupada. Lilamrita is kind of like the most expansive. And in there just highlights for us the challenges that Prabhupada faced to give his association and to plant the seeds of Krishna consciousness for us. And when we read that, you just become even more convinced how fortunate we are that these opportunities are given to us to come together again, to chant, to read. I mean, Prabhupada mentions there was, I think it's even in the introduction, it says, American lady asked him, why is there a need for another Bhagavad Gita? And I think there Prabhupada mentions, he definitely says in the lecture, there's something like 500 or 600 translations of Bhagavad Gita, even at that time in English. And there's more coming out all the time. But he said, despite all those translations, they haven't made one devotee of Krishna. The whole Bhagavad Gita culminates, become my devotee. The whole conclusion about it. And not one devotee of Krishna came. He said, so therefore making this available. And by Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita and his Bhagavatam and his traveling and his teaching and his opening temple, so many communities now all around the world where people are taking up Krishna consciousness. So this verse is talking about the importance of association. You're all experiencing that in this particular year, 125th anniversary of Prabhupada's appearance, especially wonderful opportunity. You can just go back and study and learn about not just Prabhupada's life, but also how did Prabhupada as a Vaishnava, as a person of Indian origin, transplanted at the age of 70, how is it possible that he practically even survived, what to speak of continued his own commitment to his own culture, what to speak of made a few followers, what to speak of started a whole world movement. And on this video that I mentioned, there's an interview, part of it with Thomas Hopkins. Actually, it was the opening night. He was giving kind of the keynote address. And he said, you know, we're here celebrating the 50th anniversary of Krishna Bhakti coming to the West. And in particular, I want to talk about the contributions of Bhaktivinoda Swami. And he said, as a historian, we always look for comparisons. That's how we're trained, to look for comparisons. So he said, if we look for comparisons to the achievements of Srila Prabhupada, he said, actually, there's no comparison. He said, really, there's no comparison to Prabhupada. He said, if I was to look for some comparisons, the only people really would compare, as a scholar of religion and history, would be Muhammad and Jesus Christ. He said, but that's not really a fair comparison. He said, because Jesus Christ, he was preaching or teaching his tradition in his own country, with his own people, in his own language, and with people of his own age. He said, Muhammad, he was in his own country, with his own language, and he had members of his own family who were assisting him. He said, Prabhupada, he came to a new country, a new language, a new culture, no one of his age, no one supporting him, all by himself. And he said, if you look at ISKCON, he said, after 50 years, he said, ISKCON, there's some challenges, there's always challenges. But he said, if you look at the Christian church and Islam after 50 years, he said, they were having big problems. He was just, and he said, again, it wasn't, Nutima Das, member of ISKCON, saying, yeah, we're great. It wasn't that. It was Dr. Thomas Hopkins, scholar of religion, giving an analogy like that.
He's like the leading scholar in America or the world?
Well, maybe, one of the top scholars on Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for sure. He wrote his PhD thesis on Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he was, I think, the first scholar to meet Srila Prabhupada when he first came 26 Second Avenue. And he also comments how when he was talking with the first devotees, he was asking them questions and they didn't know anything. He was like asking them about Bhaktivinoda Thakur. They didn't know what Bhaktivinoda Thakur was. And he says he realized these people, they have very little knowledge, but he was amazed how much faith they had in Prabhupada. He could tell there's something here that's lit this commitment in these young people. Because that was the era too, you probably heard there was expressions like, don't trust anyone over 30, right?
Yeah.
Prabhupada was 30 times 2 plus 10, right? But don't trust anyone over 30. But somehow he had that such a powerful impact on people's lives. To the extent it's still growing today. And especially in this 125th anniversary year, it's very important for us to go deeper in our understanding of and our appreciation for Prabhupada, because we know Prabhupada came, it wasn't like he created something out of nothing. Sometimes teachers come in so many different, from the east, from the west, the north, and the south, and they say, I've got a new thing, or I'm it. Prabhupada never said like that. Prabhupada said, I'm delivering what's been there in the past. I'm helping you awaken in your heart what you already know. And my only qualification is I'm simply repeating what my own Guru Maharaj has said. He was said it many times, I have no other qualifications. And yet he had such spiritual genius. He knew how to spread Krishna Bhakti in America, and then he went to Europe, and then soon he went back to India, where he'd originally left because he said people weren't serious about spiritual life. They thought they kind of, knew everything. They were very much caught up with Western ways. But then Prabhupada had a whole plan. He said he brought back to India. Remember what the term was? He said, I brought back my dancing white elephants. Because he knew when it happened, he brought it back to India. And people in India were saying, well, we're all trying to be like the West. And now he's got all these young Western people who are trying to be like us. They're trying to, take up our culture. So just, make people think a little bit. Well, but we're told to be like you, and you've got all the things we're seeking, and you've given it up. And you're coming back here, try to get the things we're taking for granted. So this is, again, Prabhupada's genius and Prabhupada's empowerment and Prabhupada's ability to impact people. And he went all over the world. If you read Shamasundar's biography, he talks about a couple pastimes with Prabhupada where Prabhupada was invited to a few places. And he asked Shamasundar, so where should we go? We have an invitation to this place, an invitation to that place, an invitation to, at that time, is to Africa. I think it was Nairobi first. And he Prabhupada said, where should we go? And Shamasundar said, Prabhupada, I was thinking, you haven't been to Africa yet. Maybe we should go there. Prabhupada said, yes, I was thinking the same thing. Buy the tickets. Like that, So Prabhupada went to Africa. And then a similar thing, Prabhupada had been telling his devotees, I'd like to go to Russia. And in the 60s, 70s, Russia was the seat of atheism, practically the whole world. The government was so atheistic and opposed to religion. And Prabhupada had been trying different ways to try to get into Russia. And then this invitation came. He was very excited to go there. Again, you read that part of Prabhupada's biography, it's so fascinating. He met the one professor, Kotovsky, and Prabhupada describes he was shocked because he told him, Swamiji, at the end of this life, it's finished. Prabhupada was saying, how is this possible? You're a big professor. You've studied whole Indian culture, Vedic culture, and you're thinking life ends. And then he said, I'd like to speak to some of the other professors and some of the students. They said, Swamiji, sorry, not possible.
Government wouldn't allow.
Wouldn't allow, not possible. Government won't allow. So again, like shock, what do you won't allow? How is it won't allow? So then we know the story. Probably then he stayed in his hotel. He had a hotel room for like 3 days or something. And somehow or other, by Krishna's arrangement, anybody been to Russia? There are so many devotees of Krishna there. It's one of the places Krishna consciousness is larger than so many other places in the world. So Prabhupada was there for just a few days. Shamasundar was trying to go out and find some boga, something they could cook for Prabhupada. And it was very hard. So he would as it's described, he heard there was milk at some store and he'd go across town to try to get milk, but the line was so long and then there was no milk. And then he heard there was some potatoes and some other. It was like that, just struggle to try to find some, because it was, meat and vodka is practically, what people were kind of living on. So fresh vegetables, things like that. But in one of his trips out to try to find this, a young Indian man and a young Russian man approached him. And I think their first question was something like, do you have any albums of the Beatles?
If you read Sats, we're studying that. We're reading the Lamita.
Yes, but give us the details.
If you read Satsuga's book, which was published in 1984 or 82, when the Iron Curtain was still, Soviet Union was still closed down. If you read Shamasundar's book, it was published more recently. I think it tells the real story and the real people's names.
Shamasundar. Yeah.
And he met the Indian boy and the Russian boy outside of the bank. They were saying, hey, we can give you better rubles than what they'll give you. But he decided not to do that. But they also asked, do you have any jeans? I'd like to have some jeans. Do you have
Jeans were
any
very
Beatles
popular.
music?
All the Russians wanted jeans, right?
Yeah.
And then they asked something about the Beatles.
music, yeah.
And then he said, well, I don't have any Beatles music, but I'm with the Swamiji. I think he might have said who's the guru of the Beatles.
Yeah.
We know that was not exactly accurate, but in short, Russian translation, that's how it came out. So the young Indian man was the son of some diplomat who was stationed at the embassy. And he had this one Russian friend. So they went to the hotel and Prabhupada just started teaching them about Krishna consciousness. And I think he was there for another 2 days. The boy was coming every day. Prabhupada was talking to him and teaching him. And
He slept
Shama
overnight one time.
he stayed overnight with
It
him.
was too far to go back home, so just stayed overnight.
And they were, cooking and giving him prasadam. And I think Shama Sundar had a Gita. He gave him his personal Bhagavad Gita. And they gave him some beads. I think Prabhupada initiated him.
No,
Yeah.
the Bhagavad Gita was like this. Shama Sundar, they stopped in London and his wife was there. And she snuck a Bhagavad
Malati.
Gita, with
Yes.
a bunch of pictures in his suitcase,
Yeah.
because you're not allowed to take any of that into Russia. So when they go through, the other devotees went through and they're passed, the luggage passed, and then he opened Shama Sundar's, the Bhagavad Gita flew out, all the pictures flew all over the room, and everybody's really flustered, picking up the pictures, handing it back to him. And the guy, the security guy, the customs guy was so flustered, he said, just go. So he had a Bhagavad Gita and
Because you weren't allowed to bring those, you
Teachings,
can't bring some religious
planets,
book
so
across
planets are
into the
very
country.
easy journey to other planets, which is
It's
what's
prohibited.
about it.
So Shama Sundar gave him those books, so
Yeah.
Krishna arranged.
No, just the Bhagavad Gita. He went to see some persons who were musicians in another
Uh-huh.
part and gave the easy journey to other planets, which has a lot of references to Russia.
Yeah.
In there.
But,
So-
but the core of the story is that in that visit, the Russian government said you cannot talk to anybody unless we approve.
Yeah,
And they were gonna put them in jail or.
well, yeah, it's just against the law. You can't do that. Yeah, if you want to go on a tour, you have to get on a government approved tour.
Yeah.
And then I remember so actually probably got on a short tour like that, and after a while he said, I want to go back to the hotel. It was a big deal. Once you're on that bus, you can't get off the bus, so they made some extra arrangement.
Yeah.
So then he's there for 3 days, and he preaches to this one Russian man who becomes a devotee, and there's a whole other chapter, because then Prabhupada sent a good friend of Rukmini's now, maybe back then too, a devotee lady from Sweden, yeah, from France, thank you.
Yeah, they asked in the airplane, Prabhupada said he should get married and suggested, and Shama Sundar suggested this devotee, and Prabhupada said, yes, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so this French devotee woman came and she couldn't stay because of the visa restrictions, right? So she would come and she'd come back and forth.
Actually, there's a really nice backstory about her also, that
Please,
she was taking
can you turn you should get this, yes.
she was taking care of the deities in London. She's helping with the deity worship in London. And she was listening to a lecture by Srila Prabhupada while she was addressing the deities. And Srila Prabhupada was saying that a sincere disciple, if he receives a difficult order from the guru, he will say yes right away. So she heard this lecture, so she went in front of the deities and she just said a prayer to them. I wish I could get a really difficult order from Srila Prabhupada, and I just would want to say yes right away. And then she sort of forgot about that. But then when Prabhupada and Shama Sundar came back to London, Prabhupada called her into his room. And he asked her if she would go to Russia and marry this young man. I mean, marry a complete stranger, Russian, who doesn't know anything about Krishna consciousness. I mean, probably eating lots of meat and drinking lots of vodka and all that kind of stuff. And so Prabhupada asked her, and she just said yes right away. So amazing.
And from those two, today, there's thousands of devotees in Russia.
They have it in Moscow. They have the subway, and the devotees have it planned that at every subway stop, there'll be a group, like a Bhakti Vriksha group of devotees.
That's their plan. Huh?
Every stop.
Wow. Very big Russians, Moscow's a big place too. That's a big effort they make.
And they still won't let them have it.
I heard they have a temple now, I saw it online.
They have a
There's
temple.
The temple now.
They have for quite a few years they've had a temple. But by building the big one, it's been a challenge. Yeah. So anyway, the essence of this is that we should all try to take advantage of this year in particular and try to study a little more about Prabhupada and understand that each of us has a relationship with Prabhupada. We know that, I mentioned, we're reading Prabhupada's books. We're seeing Prabhupada's picture. We have pictures of the deities that Prabhupada either installed or taught us how to install in temples that he either started or told us to start. When we have, like if we go to the temple, we have our programs. It's following traditions long established in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, but still the particular way things are put together was Prabhupada's creation. You know, like you listen to like when the deity greetings this morning in Tallahassee had deity greetings, and they played Jamuna's song, who was one of Prabhupada's first women disciples. So it's Prabhupada. Our experience is Prabhupada. And as time goes by, we're going to have different spiritual mentors. There'll be many, many different Diksha gurus. Now there's something like 100 different devotees who have that service of taking disciples. In the future, there'll be multiple hundreds, and in the future after that, there'll be thousands. But there'll always only be one founder Acharya. And every single devotee has a relationship with the founder Acharya. And if we think about it, every single devotee was inspired primarily by the founder Acharya. It doesn't mean that Diksha Guru is not important. It's exceedingly important, or Siksha Gurus are exceedingly important. But we should always keep in context, because that what keeps us together. Otherwise, a tendency to think, you know, Rain plays a drum and I get really fired up, and you get inspired by somebody else, and you get inspired by somebody else, and let's just all split. Because there's nothing that really holds us together. But if we remember that we all have an essential relationship with Prabhupada, that'll keep us together through thick and through thin. And especially to be able to see if we study Prabhupada's life as well as his teachings, then when we face different challenges or opportunities in life, we'll always have Prabhupada as our reference point. How did Prabhupada deal with that? How did Prabhupada deal with the challenges of retirement? How did Prabhupada deal with the challenges of, does anybody know Prabhupada was gored by a cow once? He was out, it was, I think in Delhi. I think it was even distributing his Back to Godhead magazine. Exactly, yeah. And he was gored by a cow. You know, like, not like brushed by a cow, gored by a cow.
Yeah,
you know,
taken to the hospital by a pastor.
yeah, somebody came and a friend happened to see him, and all, with that also when he had what do you call when you faint from the heat? Heat stroke also, and someone was able to find him, and you know, so there was a lot of challenges.
And
Read about
he
how,
raised his money just to print.
yeah,
He would go to the tea stalls and try to convince somebody to purchase one magazine. And it was like, I don't know how many rupees, not many.
probably 150 paisa or something like that. In fact, when he was going to the printer in Delhi, describe again, Leela Rita did the research that sometimes like the printer would say, Swamiji, have you had your breakfast? Say, no, I haven't eaten yet. So let's just talk about the bag. Say, no, have you eaten? I hadn't eaten. Prabhupada hadn't eaten yet. He didn't have money for food sometimes. But, you know, so this man would arrange for him to get something to eat, you know, some prasad. So poverty, like we can't even imagine, because Prabhupada was very wealthy, and then Krishna took that away and sent him on some other direction. So how did Prabhupada deal with poverty? And how did Prabhupada deal with gored by a bull? How did Prabhupada deal with so many things, so all different phases of his life? Like Giriraj Maharaj has this beautiful new book, I'll Build You a Temple. You read that, it's just struggle after struggle after struggle. And even his disciples made so many mistakes. And Prabhupada just had to clean up the mess.
They even lost the whole land and everything, and Prabhupada got it back.
Yeah, some of they canceled the sale or something like that.
Yeah.
But and then Prabhupada was so upset with them. And then he came and he somehow reestablished the sale that they had broken.
And the seller brought his guru with him because he knew Prabhupada
Yeah.
might overwhelm him with his Shakti. And then Prabhupada, he fed them lunch and he said, now you should take some rest. And the guru, he's taking a rest, and the seller taking rest. And Prabhupada went in and had them wake up the seller and take him out while the guru stayed sleeping. And they could
Renegotiated the deal.
negotiate the deal.
And then later on, they still canceled the whole thing. It was so again and again and again. But Prabhupada didn't stop. He was so determined. So
Even after his wife, he had a heart attack and died. And then his wife, his widow,
she was even more difficult to deal with. But he was so determined. So we also want to be determined like that in the midst of the happiness, as well as some distress and some success and some failure. These things are going to come. Sometimes our hearts are happy in this world. Sometimes our hearts are broken. in this world. But we can take shelter of Krishna, and ultimately every stage of life becomes a benediction to help us advance in our Krishna consciousness life. And the source of inspiration, of course, the association of devotees, as I'm emphasizing, and then especially to make sure we take advantage of Prabhupada, especially this year. So any questions or comments? We got about 10, 15 minutes. Rukmini had another call that we were going to share class. We would do that later tonight. But any questions anybody might have about anything? Well, you got like questions on a piece of paper passing up?
I have it better.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So in our life, there is always fall down, like ups and downs, ups and downs.
Yes,
So-
you've experienced those too.
So
Yeah.
how I can be consistent in those situations,
Mhm.
like when it's like life is not cooperating kind of
Yes.
situation happens.
Yeah.
How to be consistent, how I can
Yeah, that's
start.
a great question. How do we can be consistent in our spiritual practice even when there's ups and downs of life?
Yes.
Like some of the students here, maybe like you go to school one day and you think you did really good and you get the test result back and you got a C, right? You think I got to work so hard, and like, I'm sure you probably only get A minuses at the bottom level, but whatever. So yeah, and sometimes, I mean, like finances, they go up and they go down, isn't it? Like one day, the boss tells you that we're going to let you go in 2 weeks because the job's not working anymore. And you come in 2 days later and he was fired. And there's a new person who says they're going to give you promotion, right? It happens,
Yeah.
right? It happens. So how do we be consistent? I think the first thing to do is to think deeply about what it means to be consistent. Consistent doesn't mean everything's always going to go well, or I'm always going to feel happy, or I'm always going to feel needed or appreciated or even healthy. That's not what consistent means. Consistent means even when things are going down, when things are going up, I'm still trying to serve Krishna, remember Krishna, and serve Krishna. That's what it means to be consistent. And I remember one time I asked Mukunda Maharaj, who was a very steady person in his devotion, I asked him, how do you become steady in the midst of this? And he said, Prabhupada told him, he said, a Krishna conscious person is like a stockbroker. But that was interesting, like a stockbroker. When the market's going up, he's making money with the stockbroker. And when the market's going down, he's making money. Right? It's not like the stockbroker only makes money when it goes up. He's like the middleman, right? So Prabhupada's saying, in the same way, a devotee, when times are good, he's serving Krishna and he's advancing. When times are bad, he's still doing his best to serve Krishna, he or she, and make progress. If you read the Bhagavad Gita or Mahabharata, sometimes we think, yeah, well, Arjuna was, Krishna drove his chariot and everything was great and Yudhishthira was made king. Like that's the whole Mahabharata. No, that's not the whole Mahabharata. It's success and failure and failure and failure and failure and success and failure. And what looks like success, no, it's failure. It's cheated out of this and cheated out of that. But they were consistent in their determination and faith to serve Krishna. So they're acharyas, like Prabhupada is an acharya for us. So the consistency comes by going deep in our own spiritual practice, so our faith increases and our strength increases. And also that we have to remember to always pray to Krishna. So when the times are good, thank you, Krishna, for giving me this material situation so good. And when the times are difficult, Krishna, please give me the strength to get through this difficulty and remember that you're always there with me. And if we remember that Krishna is always there with us, then we kind of start floating across the sea. Prabhupada gave another example that he would say, just like the material world is described as an ocean, big, big waves. So once you get in the boat's going to go up, the boat's going to go down, left, right, thrown all over by the ocean. But if you stay in the boat, you're okay. But we have to be careful because sometimes the boat's throwing us left or right. We think, oh, let's dive into the water again. That's Maya's trick. So sometimes you have to hold on through the rough rides. And have association devotees. And make sure there's at least one or two people you feel you can reveal your mind to. That's very important. Because the mind builds up a lot of pressure. And one of the ways we relieve the pressure of the mind is being able to reveal our mind in confidence, right? The Priti Lakshana, the 6 ways of loving exchanges between devotees. So we all need at least one person in our life who we feel we can reveal our mind to. And we should do that honestly. You know, there may be something we have some doubt about, or something we're not very happy with Krishna about. Like, you know, why is Krishna doing this? That's not an uncommon question for religious people. But in association devotees, we get that strength. And sometimes the answer is we don't know why Krishna is doing this. We don't know why he's doing this. You know, it's like Krishna. My wife likes to tell me that I have this tendency, I like to re-engineer the universe. Right? It's like, you know, why can't things be like this instead of like that? So it's like, so Krishna, so I had this plan, and we're going to do this and this and this for you, of course, but this and this and this and this and this. And for some reason, you sent it another way. Now, why did you do that? Don't you realize what a good plan I had? You see, why did you mess things up? You see? So sometimes you have to kind of reveal your mind like that to a friend. And they're probably going to say, I think like that sometimes too. But you know, in the long run, I realized maybe his plan was actually the best plan. But it's difficult. Sometimes you just got all the strength you can just to hold on to that boat and not get out of the boat. And you need friends to tell you, you're doing great, just hang on the boat. And I'm here with you. And we're going to make it through together. I remember I was thinking the other day when Bhakti Tirthamaraj passed away. I was a part of it, you know, a couple of days ahead, on and off, because we live nearby. But I remember him saying, perhaps it was to Radhanath Swami, maybe it was more publicly. I remember at one point he was saying, I made it. I wasn't sure, but lately I was thinking he was just like expressing, you know, by Krishna's grace. I mean, he was a sannyasi, you know, from American background, not such an easy thing. And traveled around the world and such a great preacher. Just, I made it. I made a promise to Krishna. And despite all the temptations and all the problems and all the pressures, I made it till the day I died. I was focused on serving Prabhu. And that impressed me that, you know, such a great devotee, but still, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for all of us. So don't be disturbed by the struggle. That's part of, you know, it's not like, where's the struggle coming from? No, Krishna says we're going to struggle. Don't be surprised the fact that there's some challenges. But if we hang on to the boat, then we're okay. Is that all right?
Yes.
Prabhu.
And I want to share something that you taught me.
I taught you.
Yeah. When I was looking at trying to, you know, rebuild Tallahassee Temple, you said you should pray every day, my dear Lord Chaitanya, open the doors you want me to go through and close the ones I shouldn't go through. And so I would pray that every day. And I added a little part, Lord Nityananda, give me the strength and determination to go through those.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's great. So I'm just going to repeat that. So, dear Lord, Krishna or Lord Chaitanya is inspired. Please open the doors you want me to go through and close the doors you don't want me to. Yeah. And Lord Nityananda, please give me the strength to go through those doors. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it works, doesn't it?
Very powerful.
Yeah. And when the doors slam, we have to be ready to accept, okay, this door just slammed shut. Maybe I thought I should go through that door, but this door just slammed shut. You know? I wanted to take a music class at the second hour of school, and that class was full. Okay, maybe Krishna has a plan. He wants me to take the 5th hour. And it turns out there's somebody really important for you to meet there. Or maybe the teacher's so bad, you're meant to get a deep experience of what bad teachers are like. So you realize, wow, I gotta register earlier next time so I get the right teacher or something like that. Yeah, Prabhu?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what convinced you to get into the Krishna consciousness? Like those of us who are born in India, you know, we are exposed from young age to Krishna and Rama and hear all the stories and so on. So in your case,
Yeah, but still, you also had a rebirth in Krishna consciousness.
Oh, yeah,
At a certain point, you made a serious commitment that wasn't always there.
right, exactly.
So I'll ask you first, what made you decide to make a serious commitment?
That's it, that's exactly the reason, because for one thing, my father, he got into it after attack.
Okay.
So he's still living,
Is he?
Yeah.
How old is he?
97. So for many years, he gave me the beads, he gave me the Bhagavad Gita, but I was always so absorbed in work and studies and this and that, just always stayed there. So now and then I did some chanting by myself. And later on, when I came here, and then I started associating with all these people, that's become more regular.
That's wonderful.
That's how I got it.
That's wonderful. That's, Krishna describes your birth in the Gita, one who's the pious in the past. They take birth in a pious family, and they pick up their Krishna consciousness. Yeah. My experience was very similar. My father told me you should be a total materialist. And by his example, I could see that materialistic people were unhappy. And in this way, he blessed me to become a devotee. That's the short version of the story. But I mean, a little longer. I mean, you should ask all these different people, but since I'm sitting here today, I'll share a few thoughts. For me, through high school, I was pretty much accepting whatever everybody told me life was, because you're a kid and you just soak up whatever they kind of teach you. And then when I was in my last year in high school, I started thinking about what do I really want to do with my life. I can remember having a conversation with some friends saying, I have no idea what I want to do. I just want to be happy. Because I was starting to see that all people, like all my parents' friends, they have wealthy doctor friends and lawyer friends and this and that. And none of them seemed very happy. But all my school was telling me, just do those things, you'll be happy. Like, go to school, get a degree, become a rich doctor, and you'll be happy. But it's like, but I know so many rich doctors, they're not happy at all. So why is it going to be different for me? And then when I went to university, I was kind of really aware of there was so much suffering in the world, and I went into like political theory, political science, social science, how to make the world a better place. And I was trying to soak it up, like give me some knowledge how to make the world a better place. And then I remember we would have people come in and say we like a unit on urban crisis, and some big politician or big theorist wrote a book this thick about how to solve the urban problems. He would come and give a lecture on Monday. Like, take notes. Yeah, we got this. We got to do. We're gonna fix it. Make the world better. And then 1 week later, some other scholar would come, some other politician, completely dismantle everything this guy had said, and prove how it's completely wrong, and to put forward his ideas. So I started thinking that do these people have any idea what's going on and how to make things better? So then that kind of led. I kind of went through that type, maybe a little bit of an analytical process like that. And then I did not believe in God. I was an atheist for a certain number of years because I thought religious people were really making the world a bad place. But through their selfishness and their pride, they were not helping the world. And then my different experience led me to like study some philosophy, okay, how can we, who are we in the first place? And that led me to study like some political sciences about how society should be structured. And after some period, those all seemed pretty hollow. And when I started taking up some spiritual practice and I met devotees. And so spiritual experience started becoming more and more real, and my material activities started becoming less and less satisfying. And these kind of started running out, like, okay, check the box. That didn't make me happy. That didn't make me happy. That didn't make me happy. And meanwhile, these things kept opening the door further and further. So one thing led to another. I went on Zen retreats, and I went, I started experimenting with all these different things. And I traveled around the country, and I ended up in Boulder, Colorado, because I met a young woman one afternoon in Ann Arbor who told me, if you're really serious about spiritual life, you have to go to Boulder, Colorado. And I thought years later, if I'd been really serious, I would have met somebody told me you should go to Nepal. But, Christian knew I couldn't handle Nepal, so he just gave me a little challenge, Boulder. So then I went to Boulder, had a few experiences on the way across the country, and I went to Boulder, and I was out of money by the time I got there. I'd been hitchhiking for about 6 weeks, And I camped in some Buddhist people's backyard for a couple of days, and then they told me, okay, you gotta move. So I thought, okay, what do I do? And I'd seen the devotees again, and they told me, you can come and stay in the temple for a week, try, see if you like it. And then there was a yoga retreat going on. The yoga retreat cost $75. And I had $75 left. And I thought, if I go to the yoga retreat and it's not my path, I'm broke. And now I'm out of options. So I'll be stuck. But if I go to the Krishna temple, and that's not my path, I'll still have $75. I still have some options left. So I went and moved into the temple, and I stayed for a week. At the end of the week, they asked me, said, so what do you want to do? You want to go, or you want to stay? And so I'm not convinced this is it. You know, I'm not convinced of everything, but I'm convinced that I need to learn more about it. You know, I haven't found it to be false yet. Everything else I tried for more than a week kind of hit a wall, didn't go any deeper. So I know this, so I want to stay longer. So they said, okay, that's good. Come on upstairs, so shave your head. And in those days, once you shaved your head, it's not like you just walked out the door the next day. Because, you know, again, men had hair down here, and it was like, you really stood out. So then I moved in the temple, and the night I moved in, I prayed, like you prayed. I said, dear Krishna, I don't know the order, but dear Krishna, dear Rama, dear Allah, dear Jehovah, dear God, whoever you are, wherever you are. I don't really know what you want me to do, but I believe you exist, and I'm trying my best to try to find you. I don't think there's any other purpose that's more important in life. And I'm not sure if you want me to be here. I'm not sure if this is the right place to be. But you please show me. But I promise I'm not going to leave unless I find something better. I'm not going to turn around after a month and say, you know, maybe I should go back to college, or maybe I should go back to my girlfriend, or go back to my parents, or go back to my job, because those things had reached a dead end. So I only going to go forward. And then I forgot, I'll have to add your prayer. And Lord Nityananda, please give me the strength to keep moving forward. I like that. That's my kind of story in short form. But it's fascinating when you meet devotees in different parts of the world. Maybe someday you can, when you have one of your sanghas, just ask everybody to go around and tell your story. Because everybody has these amazing stories of how Krishna acted in their life. And some people say, I just walked in the temple. Sometimes even Western people, never been in a temple of any kind, any Hindu temple at all, any Christian temples, walked in the temple, saw the deities, thought, this is God. What do? I want to move in. You meet people like that. And we met I was in Denver about a year ago, and I went back for the American Academy of Religion convention and went to the temple for the Sunday feast and gave the talk. And I noticed there was one young woman, maybe 25-ish years old, very excited and ecstatic about kirtan. Just you could tell she was just chanting with such enthusiasm. Western person, and just like deeply focused in kirtan. So as it turned out later on, they showed up. Prashadam, there was a seat open next to her, so I sat down and started talking to her. And I said, like, I was so amazed. You really love kirtan. She said, yeah, I just love the kirtan so much. You know, I've been coming here for a few months, and it's the best thing, and it just makes me feel so wonderful. She was really sincere about it. So, you know, as you do when you're connecting with people, you kind of take the next step. So I said, well, you know, you must know that's because Krishna's name is not different from Krishna. God is within his name. She said, I don't believe in God. Just like that. I was shocked because she was so into the chanting, but she was like firm. Don't, you know, she didn't say this, but the message was, don't try to tell me about God. I don't believe in God. So I just like changed the topic, you know. So you love the kirtan, you like the prasadam too. But she was, you know, she said she comes every week. She loves the chanting, and she's just, you can just tell, you know, when people really give their heart to chant. But for her, God was like, forget it. Eventually, she's going to come around. Okay, maybe he's there because his name's kind of nice, but, you know. And I was in another place recently. Oh, this is new. When we were at Krishna House in Gainesville just a week ago, met this young girl, college student living in the temple. And I said, how did you come to Krishna? And the short version, she said, was vampires. It's like, vampires? Vampires? So she told me there's some book. Remember the name of the book? There was some book about some vampire woman.
Oh, Thirst. That's it.
Thirst. Have you heard of the book Thirst? She said, don't read it. She said, don't want to read this book. It's not a pious book. But somehow in this book, there's a character who's a vampire and does all the nasty things that vampires do. But apparently one of the messages of this book is that at the time of death, you need to remember Krishna. So this girl read this book. She's like, wondering, like, who is this guy Krishna? And why do I, I have to remember at the time of death? How am I going to remember him if I don't learn about him? So someone, this seed was planted through this vampire book about who is, so now, go to the temple. She's got a sari and tilak and she's, chanting on beads and like
Playing Madonna, so
playing. Yeah, she's a great Madonna player. And then there's a devotee in Salt Lake City who's actually professor of environmental engineering. And he came to the temple because he told me he loved to cook. I guess they had like here, maybe like a sangha, and it wasn't like they were installed deities, so everybody was helping to cook and things like that. He loved to cook, so he started cooking for all the events. And he didn't really like the sangha, he didn't like their philosophy, but he loved to cook. So he would just cook, and then after a while, okay, well, you can cook them, and then we're going to offer it. And okay, so he's eating prasadam and doing all the different things, and here, slowly, now he's like initiated devotee. He's a leader, and one of the leaders of Salt Lake City community, okay, because he liked to cook. And I met a lady just a couple weeks ago in Naperville, an Indian lady. So I was a little surprised. She said she became a devotee because she loved to dance. She loved to dance. And she came to the temple, so everybody's dancing. Like, wow, this is great. I love to dance. So she just got so excited and kept coming because it was a wonderful place to dance. And then Krishna captured her. So Krishna's expert. There's that one poem that if you want to continue material life, is it Sanatana Goswami? Whatever you do, don't go down to the bank of the Jamuna and see that beautiful blue boy with this flute and this peacock feather, because you won't be able to continue your material life. So somehow other people, they make that connection with Krishna, and nothing else ever really seems the same. Because it's right out of the Gita, Paramits Vishwani Bhartate, there's a higher taste. So some people, they're a little attracted by chanting, some people the deities, some people that, by dancing, some people by vampires, or whatever. Krishna gets a little experience and then they're caught. So that's why it's so important for us to take advantage of the association. And Prabhu often would say, according to our capacity, just read it the other day, Prabhu said to try to share Krishna consciousness as best you can according to capacity. And some people's capacity is like, they walk up to perfect strangers and just convince them to buy a set of books and to come to the temple and chant and japa. And others of us are like, maybe we can mention to a friend, it's really nice, you should try it. But that's what we can do that for Krishna and try to engage Krishna that way. So how long have you been playing drum?
Actually, I started when I came in. I usually played the djembe.
Oh, yeah.
So connected the rhythm to my hair.
It worked well. Yeah. So by that drumming, that drumming adds so much to the kirtan. So whatever we can do, we do it for Krishna. Mataji loves to cook, I think. The food tastes, the prasad tasted like we love to cook.
Singing,
Yeah.
singing also, she sings.
So,
Bhagavad
cook for Krishna.
She sings very well.
And singing too, yeah. So sing for Krishna. Whatever we do for Krishna.
And teach kids.
And teach, it's so important with kids.
And my husband and my son both learn Midanga.
Very good.
They're taking lessons.
So they can accompany your singing.
Yeah.
Very good. Very nice. Any other questions for we have to go soon?
Can you share any of your memorable or very significant interactions with Sri Prabhu?
She can. Because I came much later.
Haribol.
Yeah, Rukmini came in 1968. I didn't come till 1975. By that time, this guy was very big, so there wasn't so much personal interaction with Srila Prabhupada. Rukmini came early on, so she can share a couple of
Oh, my
stories.
most favorite story.
You want to turn?
So I'll tell you my most favorite story of Srila Prabhupada. This was told to me by the devotee who, asked.
Yeah, he wants your story too, so tell your favorite one.
Okay, so anyway, this devotee, he was at New Vrindavan in West Virginia. He was a brand new devotee. And so he asked Srila Prabhupada, is there any service I can do for you? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you can go where I will not go. And he was really bewildered because Prabhupada was going everywhere. Prabhupada had just come from Japan, San Francisco, Texas, Chicago. He's in New Vrindavan, he's going to New York and London and Germany. So he was really bewildered. And he said, but Srila Prabhupada, where is it that you won't go? And Srila Prabhupada just shot back. He said, to the future. And he said, and by the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them. So I think that's a really, really important instruction for all of us. So, you guys are people of the future. People of the future. So, if we just try to teach people a lot of sectarian things, then who will be attracted? But if we teach them, show them how much Krishna loves them by our own interactions with them, that will be great service to Srila Prabhupada.
Very good.
Nice story, right? Yeah, I hope you remember.
Tell one person.
One personal story? Okay, I'll tell one personal story. So when I was a young devotee, I was in Srila Prabhupada's apartment with a small group of devotees. He had an apartment upstairs behind the storefront of 26 2nd Avenue. And this was in 1968. And he was looking into each one of our faces like this. And like this. I want each one of you to go somewhere and open a temple somewhere. I was looking from one to the next to the next. And I was only 16. And I said, I was really kind of shocked. And I said, even the girls, Swamiji, at that time we called him Swamiji. He said, even the girls. And he was laughing and he said, there is no difference between the boys and the girls. When you're teaching Krishna consciousness, there is no difference. And then he started talking about Lord Nityananda's wife, Janava Devi, and how she was leading the whole Sankirtan mission. How she was the acharya for the Sankirtan mission. So that was a very powerful person.
The state story.
Yeah, that's a good one. You want to hear a funny one? Okay, so this one is quite funny. So this one took place in Berkeley, California, and it was after Rath Yatra. A group of devotees gathered in Prabhupada's room after the Rath Yatra. And one of the artists from the BBT pulled a copy of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya off the shelf. And there was a picture of Lord Chaitanya and Panchatattva on the front. And this artist said to Prabhupada,
With his long hair still.
what?
Lord Chaitanya still has his long hair.
Yeah, well,
Like that
Lord
picture.
Chaitanya in his household
Yes,
life,
yes.
right? And so he said, Srila Prabhupada, so often we see pictures of Lord Chaitanya and he had quite long hair. Prabhupada could tell his mentality, right? Why do I have to shave my head? What? I'd like to have long hair too. And so Prabhupada said, yes. He goes, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was hippie. And what was really super funny was that he had just been somewhere where Malati was somewhere. She told me that, I didn't know this at the time, but he was somewhere where they had Gornitai deities and the hair was all the way down to the bottom of their back. And Prabhupada told them in that place, he said, Lord Chaitanya is not a hippie. He told them to cut their hair to be here, So anyway, here he comes. The next place he says, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was hippie. and then he goes, therefore he has come to save you. but because of
Come to
his,
save all the hippies.
yeah, he was a hippie, so he's come to save all of you. And so, but because of his Bengali accent, you know how in Bengali the S's are like a little bit SH. Yeah. So we weren't sure if he was saying save you or
Save
you. So then Prabhupada just picked up on that. He's going laughing, he's going, save you and shave you. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to save you and shave you, save you and shave you. And everyone was just laughing like anything. So thanks.
We see that the shaving saves.
That was really funny.
Can you tell me the rest of the Nairobi story? How I went there and then what happened?
In Africa with the building when nobody was coming. That part
Well,
was there?
they were going to Hindu temple and.
Yeah, because he wanted to preach the Africans. That part.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yes, so when Prabhupada went to Africa for the first time, and Ramananda was the first devotee born there, maybe there were some others. And there was some Indian, people of Indian origin who were living there, and they kind of naturally, the devotees had found them out and they welcomed them into their homes. And, like you were saying, it's kind of natural. So they kind of found this comfort zone of preaching to the Indian people and weren't having a lot of success with the Africans. So Prabhupada came to Africa and saw that the only people that were really teaching and reaching out to were Indian people. And Prabhupada wasn't happy with that. He said, this is Africa. We came to reach out to the Africans. They said, well, Prabhupada, they're really not so interested. And, like the Indian people are. Prabhupada said, no. He said, rent a hall in an African part of town and we'll go and we'll have kirtan. And we'll invite them all to come. So I guess they put posters up and they rented some hall.
It was a Hindu hall, actually.
Was it Hindu hall? But
In the African areas.
in African
on the
area.
edge.
So they opened, so then they were there and there was like a handful of Indian people there. And none of the African people there. And the boys were kind of thinking like, we told you so, Prabhupada, but it's tougher than it seemed. Prabhupada said, open the doors and start kirtan. So they opened all the doors and started kirtan. Within a few minutes, the place was full. Because, the African culture, it's, drums and music and singing and dancing. And they were all completely attracted to them. They filled the place up. I don't know how the rest of the story goes. I'm sure Prabhupada was looking at his disciples like, see, I told you so. So, Prabhupada was expert like that. And we have to try to become expert like that as best we can. That according to, as he said, time, place, and circumstance, we know expert ways to introduce Krishna consciousness in ways that will attract people. So just like with the young people, is talking about, hippies and saving the hippies and all that. And then when he would go different places, the message was always the same, but the way he presented it, was different. It was just like if you're speaking to children, you're going to present the message a little different than you are to older men. Or, if you're talking to a group of, if you actually speak to a group, association, a women's association, they're all in their 20s and they all walk in with 2 kids. The topic is not probably going to be renunciation. It's not going to connect with them. You might talk about, Christian conscious family life and the importance of raising spiritually educated children, because that's where their mind is generally, just speaking in generalities. So in the same way, we have to kind of learn to be expert of understanding people's mood and their desires, because Krishna is all attractive. So how do we make Krishna attractive to this group of people? How do we make Krishna attractive to that group of people? Just like Prabhupada one time spoke to a group of students. And he asked me, he said, is there any intelligent student in the room? And they all pointed to some boy with big, thick glasses. It's him. He went down, Prabhupada said, come down. So he went down on the stage at the front of the classroom with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, okay, so you're a very intelligent boy. Please point to your head. Pointed to his head. He said, okay, point to your stomach. Point to your stomach. Okay, point to your knee or some bodily parts. I don't know which ones, but he pointed to his knee. Prabhupada said, now point to yourself. And the boy was kind of like bewildered. And all the kids laughed. And Prabhupada said, thank you very much. And then he gave a little talk about how you're not your head, you're not your knee, you're not your stomach, you're the person, the soul within the body. Because he could understand that's the good way. So, around that same time, he spoke at Ohio State University, he spoke at Harvard University. It wasn't like he said, okay, is there any intelligent professor in the room? Yes, you, the head of the mathematics department, please come down and please point to your head, point to your stomach. He wouldn't have done that. He spoke differently according to the audience. So we have to learn to do that too. Like you're a doctor. What kind of medicine did you practice in India?
I just graduated from medical school.
You just graduated, okay. So, as a doctor, part of the role of the doctor is you have to help convince your patients to take the prescription, right?
Yes.
So you have to present it to them in a way that they're gonna appreciate it. Like there's this English expression, just a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. right? So we have to sometimes learn how to, what is the sugar that makes the medicine go down? So sometimes we have friends or people in the office, they're very enthusiastic at school. What do? You know, you don't do this, you don't do that. You don't ever want to go to the bar with us. So what do you do for fun? And you can tell them. And other people, they don't want to have anything to learn about it. But if you bring them some prasadam, you know, then they'll like it, right? If there's some Bengali friends, you bring them ras malai. If they're American friends, you bring them cookies, right? And after they really love the cookies, then you, after a few visits with cookies, you say, if you like the cookies, do you want to try this? Yeah, what is that? So you try from the scratch to give them the cookies. I remember there was one at devotee Nidra, wonderful book distributor in Denver. She used to take like Mahaprasadam to the airport, and she would give like Mahaprasadam chapatis and stuff to the workers. And I remember one time she gave a chapati to this one guy, and there was a tulsi leaf on it. So what's he know? He took the tulsi leaf, spit it out, and then ate the rest of the chapati. It was like, well, maybe bringing tulsi leaves to non-devotees isn't the best thing, because they don't understand it, but they can understand other things. So to be willing to be flexible, not that what works for me has to work for you. You know, I may love reading Bhagavad Gita, but somebody else likes to read Nectar Devotion. So let's do that. Some people, like with the Rath Yatra, like having these big, beautiful parades, you know, some people love parades. They may not want to sit down and hear philosophy, but they love the parade. So that's part of our challenge.
There was a sequel about, and it's kind of cultural.
Yes.
That visit Nairobi. So Prabhupada's servants washed his clothes and hung them to dry on the roof. And then they went out later to pick them up and they were all gone.